My coordinates seem to have slipped a little. Still not bad after 29,000 light years. I do hope you can spare a moment or two, Doctor.
Sarcasm always was a weak point with you, wasn't it? May I say that I think you look quite ridiculous in those clothes?
I am traveling incognito.
Oh, why?
We Time Lords don't care to be conspicuous. Some of us, that is.
Now, look, if you've come down here merely to be rude...
I came to warn you. An old acquaintance has arrived on this planet.
Huh? One of our people?
The Master.
That jackanapes. All he ever does is cause trouble.
He'll certainly try to kill you, Doctor. The tribunal thought the two ought to be made aware of your danger.
How very kind of them.
You are incorrigibly meddlesome, Doctor, but we've always felt that your hearts are in the right places. But be careful. The Master has learnt a great deal since you last met him.
I refuse to be worried by a renegade like the Master. He's an unimaginative plodder.
His degree in cosmic science was of a higher class than yours?
Yes, well, I was a late developer.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with...
Hello, it's Scott.
Hello, Scott. This week we are continuing our, drive, I guess, through every Doctor chronologically, and we are arriving at Jon Pertwee, and we decided this month, I guess, because we're looking at it basically taking us a month to get through everybody, although it's only the first 2 weeks of March. We're going to be with Pertwee. We are looking at Terror of the Autons, part 1 and 2 this week, which is the first episode with the Master in it. And boy, is it certainly a story in Doctor Who. Terror of the Autons is definitely a thing that happens. We'll get into it in a bit, but first, this episode first aired on the 2nd of January 1971, which was a Saturday and a staggering 52 years, 1 month, and 22 days ago at the time of recording. The US president was... Oh?
I remember it well that day. So good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a rainy day, if I remember correctly.
It's always a rainy day.
The US president was Richard Nixon, and the UK prime minister was one Edward Heath. His name comes up all the time recently. Could you guess, and again, I would be amazed if you could, what the number one movie at the box office was on this day? I can tell you I only have the US number one, so you're going to have to think like America. It's not a film I've ever heard of either,
okay.
So best of luck.
So if it's not a film you've heard of, it's probably not a film I've heard of. Any hints?
Tommy Lee Jones is in it.
Tommy Lee. Men in Black. Am I close?
No, of course. You're bang on. It was, in fact, Love Story. Good guess. Love Story is a 1970 American romantic drama film written by Eric Segal, who was also the author of the best-selling 1970 novel of the same name. A book and the movie came out in the same year.
Jesus Christ.
Crazy. It was produced by Howard G. Minsky and directed by Arthur Hiller and starred Ali MacCraw and Ryan O'Neill alongside John Marley, Ray Milland, and Tommy Lee Jones in his film debut in a very minor role, apparently. So the first time that Tommy Lee Jones is ever on screen is in this movie. I wonder if he looked like an old man in that as well.
Probably did. He's always looked like an old man.
he's always been old. Yeah. The film is considered one of the most romantic films ever by the American Film Institute, coming in number 9 on the list, and is one of the highest grossing films of all time when adjusted for inflation. The basic plot is a regular like rom-com, like two people fall in love but life gets in the way type deal. It's not the type of movie that really appeals to me in any way, shape, or form, but cool. I'm glad it's super romantic and made lots of money. That's cool.
It better be fucking romantic if it's called A Love Story.
Yeah, and it's considered to be one of the most romantic films ever made. That's some big boots.
Yeah.
Like,
I bet you part of that is just because it's called A Love Story. And people are like, yeah, this is going to be a love story.
Yeah, and like 1970 movies had just been invented, so it was really easy to make Easy to make rom-coms back then. Nothing absolutely zilch of interest happened on this day in history. But if we look back across time, we can find that on the 2nd of January in 1959, the USSR launches the Luna 1 spacecraft, which is the first object to leave Earth's gravity, reaching the vicinity of the moon and to be placed into a heliocentric orbit, which is cool as fuck. I love the space race. It was great. In 1960, Senator John F. Kennedy announces his candidacy for the U.S. presidency. I wonder what ever happened to that guy. Then, in 1969, the Beatles begin rehearsals while being filmed for the Let It Be project at Twickenham Film Studios, London. Let It Be, obviously, in 1969 was getting filmed by Peter Jackson. Did you watch that on Disney Plus, the Let It Be documentary about the Beatles?
It took you a while to deliver that joke because you couldn't think of a name. No, I haven't actually. It's really long, and I just haven't had the time to look at it. And every time
it is extremely long. It's like 3 episodes, and each episode's like 3.5 hours. But I watched each episode in 2 parts. So for me, it was a 6-episode show, and I loved it. I don't even care that much about the Beatles, and I absolutely adored it. I thought it was superb. It was so amazing to just sit and watch.
Wait a minute, are you telling me that Peter Jackson made some really long things?
Yeah, he made a really long movie. And he did, and he does the thing that he does all the time now, which is find old footage and remaster it for like no reason other than he just likes to do it.
Apparently, cool. his World War II. What was it called again? They shall never grow old.
They will be. Yeah.
Something like that. Apparently, that's really good as well.
It is. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's superb. Really, really worth watching that, and also Let It Be. Very similar in tone. In 2018, WHO reveals it will classify gaming addiction as a mental health condition in its next classification of diseases. This is a disease that apparently I have definitely got. I don't know how I feel about gaming addiction being classified as a genuine mental health condition. It's a messy subject, you know.
I mean, if you're playing video games like 24 hours a day and it actively actively causes you not to go out and get a job or something like that, then I guess it's an addiction,
But I don't know if that's the video game doing it, or if it's just the fact that you are depressed and the video game is giving you dopamine.
Yeah, I mean, you could replace video games with a book or movies or TV, and it's all the same, isn't it?
Yeah, so I don't think the video game itself is addicting. Like, like nicotine actively produces a chemical in your brain that is addicting. Yeah. Video games don't really do that. I guess dopamine is kind of addicting, but then you'll be like, hey, running, dude, that's a mental health problem. But yeah, it's kind of messy. I'm not sure if I fully agree with it, but I haven't done enough research to really argue any points against it other than I play a lot of video games. So what you gonna do? That's all I've got for the On This Day section, Scott. Nice and brief.
I've actually kind of got something,
Don't step on my segment, you bitch.
Very nearly 49 years after this episode, Sacha Dhawan is revealed as a master in Doctor Who.
Oh wow.
So this obviously Terror of the Autons started on the 2nd of January. Spyfall Part 1 aired on the 1st of January 2020, so yeah, it's a wild coincidence.
That is... No, it was planned from the start. When they were writing this episode, it was their long-term plan, their long-term vision. But that's cool. That's a cool bit of Doctor Who trivia, for sure. Why don't you take us into the Writer's Corner for this episode, Scott?
Yeah, Terror of the Autons is obviously the very start of Season 8 of Doctor Who. A mere 279 episodes into the show's run. Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So Season 7 was obviously the season to exile the Doctor on Earth, and for Season 8, Barry Letts and Terrence Dicks wanted to expand the regular cast to make the Unit era more defined. Season 7 basically just had Brigadier and some unnamed soldiers, and this episode introduces 3 brand new characters to the show. Obviously, I'll get to them when it comes to them in the show, but the big one is obviously the Master. That's the whole reason why we're doing it. It's the most defining villain for the Pertwee era. He lasted all of season 8, which is mental to think about.
Imagine being the villain in every single episode. Like,
so yeah, just a little
crazy.
So yeah, just a little bit of origins for the Master. Barry and Terrence wanted to give the Doctor a Moriarty because they considered the Brigadier to basically be his Watson for a while, which I can totally see that. He's like a bumbling fool, the Brigadier.
Yeah.
Terrence Dix actually came up with the name of the Master. He's also the guy who came up with the name of the Time Lords and all sorts of names. You know, Terrence Dix is the granddaddy of all the Doctor Who names.
Yeah.
Immediately, Barry wanted Roger Delgado to play the role because they were great friends and even had a sword fight as actors in a drama once. So I think Roger Delgado is like the perfect choice for this incarnation of the Master. He is so charming and just lovely.
He is, you know, this isn't our first time with Roger Delgado as the Doctor in the podcast.
As
obviously,
the Master.
we've had him. We had him in the Damons.
And also the Sea
Have
Devils.
we covered it? And the Sea Devils, yes. And every time he is on screen, he's always giving a fantastic performance. I don't think I've ever seen him and been like, I don't believe that you're the Master. You know, I feel like you're just reading lines. To me, like, he feels like the Master. He feels completely in this character that he's portraying. It's a very solid performance.
Yeah, the best part about the Master is it feels like he's basically just playing himself almost. Like, you can just tell that he was really charming off screen as well as on screen. And you can just really get that he's a really good dude. But here he turns up the charm and somehow makes it evil, which is an interesting take because obviously most villains are just maniacal. Whereas
it's
here...
the goatee. It's the goatee.
Yeah.
The goatee makes you 15% more evil, so...
So his name was Roger Caesar Marius Bernard D. Delgado Torres Castillo Roberto. He was born in 1918 to a Belgian mother and Spanish father, and was often typecast as a villain. Obviously, because of his goatee, his beard kind of like comes to a point. His eyes.
He's got a villainous, like a classic villain looking face. You know.
Yeah, he
perfect,
is so
perfect
good.
for playing a villain. It's like you know, Christopher Lee. Like, no matter what, he always, like, you look at him, you go, "Wow, you look like a villain." Like,
speaking of Christopher Lee, when we did Tomb of the Cybermen, I think I mentioned that he would be a really good movie Master alongside Peter Cushing. How amazing would that be?
That would have been great. That would have been great for sure. Yeah.
So Barry said that Roger Delgado had an enormous capacity for villainy and charm, and that was the part that the Master demanded. Some sources say that John Pertwee was kind of irritated because of how much coverage Delgado got in the press around this time, which I completely buy. Basically, John Pertwee is exactly like the Third Doctor. He's kind of, in his own ways, kind of selfish, kind of.
Yeah, you know, a bit rude and blunt.
Yeah. But apparently at the same time, he's also a charming guy. I get big mixed vibes off of John Pertwee. He's my favourite Doctor because he's rude and blunt in the show.
He's especially rude and blunt in episode 1 of this episode. You know, he's no charm to him. He's just kind of mean.
God, we'll get to it next week, but he has some amazing lines in part 3. I'm very excited to get to that. Apparently some executives actually thought that Roger Delgado was the new Doctor just because of how much he was marketed in the newspapers and the Radio Times.
Jesus.
The Master was used as a main antagonist all seasons, which I said before, which Barry and Terrence consider a mistake because stories were becoming too predictable. You know, if every story ended up with, oh yeah, the big twist is it's Master. Yeah, we could have seen that 5 episodes, you know, after 5 stories in a row.
Could you imagine watching a season of Doctor Who and every single episode the twist is it's the same villain from before?
Yeah.
Like, you would get so sick of it. Like,
but it's also a fun idea on paper. Like, a through link of each story having to be the master. That's an interesting concept, but don't make it a twist in every episode. That's really bizarre.
Yeah, the master just shows up in a disguise. It makes the show almost feel like, like a Scooby-Doo type kids cartoon where it's the villain, the same villain, and he's like, you foiled me this week, but I'll get you next time, type of deal. It almost kidifies the show a bit more than it already is.
I think it could have worked if the master just had like a big master plan he had throughout the whole season, and each story was a new element to this big master plan that it had to unfoil.
The issue, I think, with that is if the master has this big master plan, is he needs to constantly be winning until the end, otherwise his plan is just foiled at the first step.
Yeah.
And the show is built around, especially in this era, the Doctor wins at the end of the story. There's a happy ending,
It's a complicated issue to talk about because obviously there's so many ways we could have gone about it. But I think having the whole season dedicated to one villain is interesting for classic Coup. They've never done that again. And also,
reason.
Yeah. Also, Roger was finding it difficult to find other work around this time because obviously he was basically a series regular at this point. He would sometimes not appear for the first 2 episodes of a story, but he was in most episodes of season 8. So most casting companies just thought, oh yeah, I guess you're just a regular on Doctor Who now. You won't need more work. So so we decided at the end of the season, at the end of the Demons actually, which we saw, to just kind of soft retire the role. He would sometimes appear in season 9, I think 2 stories in season 9, and 1 more story in season 10. We had massive plans for the Master to be involved in Pertwee's final story, which never came to be because his last appearance was Frontier in Space in series 10, because he sadly died not too long after that in a car crash at the age of 55. Which is, again, the Doctor Who curse, dying way too young.
The Doctor Who curse. Yep, dying in your 50s.
And
Absolute
also,
nightmare.
John Pertwee cites this reason as one of the reasons he left Doctor Who, because he just couldn't go on without Roger Delgado being there, which is so sad, so depressing.
Yeah, it is. It is for sure.
So Barry Letts was keen to make stories more realistic than usual. Because he thought before John's era, most Doctor Who stories was science fantasy instead of science fiction. And I can understand that because, bringing in the whole idea of plastic being, a living organism is, I guess, scientific? I don't know.
No, it's not, but I get... I guess, the idea that the Pertwee's Doctor, especially compared to, Hartnell or Troughton, does more science. He's tinkering and engineering with things and building things constantly, and he's got a lab. He's a scientist doing science things, so it makes it more lean into the sciencey side of things rather than the let's just have an adventure and run around, woo, explosions. I guess that's kind of what he's meaning at it. It's less of a fantasy adventure and more of no, we're doing science here, even if the science is complete gibberish.
That's one of my favorite things about John Pertwee, by the way, that he is a scientist, because most of the time we just forget the Doctor's a scientist. He just, he never seems to be a scientist much.
I like each Doctor kind of having a different hobby and fascination that they're obsessed with. The first Doctor was just a douche, and then the second Doctor was I like my flute. And the third Doctor's actually, I'm a scientist. And then the fourth Doctor got really into scarves for a while. Every Doctor's just kind of got a thing that they like about them.
What is Jodie's thing? What is Jodie Whittaker's thing?
What was Jodie's thing?
Genocide.
It was genocide. That was it. It was let's just murder everybody. Let's solve our problems by death.
But I guess you could also say that the whole plastic thing is science-based, because obviously science was... Oh, sorry. I almost said science was a brand new thing around this time. Plastic was almost a brand new thing around this time. We didn't discover science till the 70s.
Hey, they found it under a rock. It was weird.
But yeah, around this time, plastic was becoming a common household thing. You never really had plastic before that, and obviously, it's the thing that Doctor Who does really well. Stuff around the house becomes intimidating to a child now.
Yeah, becomes scary. Like, you're not going to sit on an inflatable couch anymore.
The Autons opened up the last series of Classic Who and was a massive hit for the show, so they immediately knew that they should be brought back. Maybe a bit too soon, I would say. 1 year later, maybe just hold off for a little bit, but they brought him back just 1 year later. The director of this episode was Barry Letts, who we talked about last month because he directed Enemy of the World, and the writer of this episode was Robert Holmes, and we'll talk about him next week. This episode was almost destroyed by the BBC. Most people think, the BBC did most of their wiping of the episodes in the 60s. This continued until the 70s, but the BBC would actually destroy the colour copies for a lot of Pertwee stories. So for decades, people had to watch a lot of Pertwee stories in black and white. To make the coloured versions, they would combine the colour signal from an American off-air Betamax tape with the BBC's high-quality black and white film recordings.
Jesus Christ.
Betamax is obviously an old type of videotape, but isn't as visually impressive. It's really rough.
It's insane. It baffles me constantly how the BBC used to treat Doctor Who. Like, this is just insane that they were like, screw it. We'll just keep the black and white ones. Who cares? Like, and then everyone has to jump through all these ridiculous hoops to try and be like, wait, we can bring it back. Hang on. Like,
I know. It just never had any foresight, and so many man-hours went into making Doctor Who presentable again. It's insane to think about.
Yeah.
This method was applied to a lot of stories in the 90s with mixed results. Often you'd get colours bleeding into each other, or the image would be too saturated or not saturated enough. They'd often have trouble with flesh tones. And the version on ITVX is from the DVD, so it's improved as it was. It's as good as it could have been in 2011. I think the Blu-ray of it did it so much better, but sometimes on the DVD version you'll see colours kind of bleeding into each other. Whereas the flash tones are kind of off slightly, but they did the best they could, honestly. It looks it's decent enough.
It looks good. Yeah, it looks good. It's crazy to me that BritBox was the same, that they're not using the Blu-ray versions.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why they wouldn't. They are available to use. Why not use them?
It's possible that we'd have to pay the people who upgraded it more. The restoration team would have to be paid for that version to be used on Brit. I'm not sure.
I have no idea.
I would imagine this version on BritBox would have been before the Blu-ray came out. So again, I'm just not too sure.
They already had it. They already had it digitized and couldn't be bothered doing it again.
Yeah, that's possible. The last thing is, one of the original titles of the story was The Spray of Death, which is obviously referring to this flowers being a spray of death, which I prefer Terror of the Autons. It invokes more of a fear into the audience, basically because one word, it basically means fear.
Yeah, terror. It's interesting calling it Terror of the Autons when the Autons have so little to do.
Yeah.
For quite some time in this story. But I mean, that's kind of a classic Who move, so I'm not that surprised.
Yeah, we'll get into why we're not in episode 1 later on, but do you want to dive into episode 1, speaking of?
I guess. Let us begin episode 1 of Terror of the Autons.
A Nestine is a ruthlessly aggressive, intelligent alien life form.
Well, what do they look like?
Well, I suspect myself their basic form is analogous to a cephalopod.
What's a cephalopod?
An octopus. I thought you took an A-level in science.
Didn't say I passed. Ugh, an octopus.
They manifest themselves as a disembodied, mutually telepathic intelligence.
But if they're disembodied, how can they hurt us?
They make themselves bodies when they need them.
You mean like Frankenstein?
No, they have a natural affinity for plastic. Now, if you've quite finished asking questions.
Sorry, just forget I'm here.
The episode begins in the circus, where every episode of Doctor Who begins. We've got we spend like a solid like minute or so just kind of looking around the circus. Like we have a really long shot of some tigers as well.
Yep.
It's very strange, but I guess they were filming at what must be a genuine circus, and they were like, screw it, let's get all the footage we can get while we're here.
Yeah, apparently the circus company worked a lot with the BBC around this time, so obviously perfect opportunity to film an actual circus, I guess.
Yeah.
Although the circus
yeah.
doesn't really have much relevance to the overall story, I think.
I don't think they come back again, do they?
They come back again in episode 2.
I don't remember, but I guess we'll find out when we get around to it. But the ringleader, what's the guy in charge of a circus called? The guy that is, I don't remember what he's called, but the guy in charge of a circus, the circus man, comes around, and we see like horse van or whatever they're called appear with the noise of the TARDIS, and the Master step out of it, which I think is a really fun way to introduce the Master.
Yeah.
Is him showing up in his TARDIS, which has a working chameleon circuit. Which
Because,
is this the first instance of a chameleon circuit working in Doctor Who?
Bruh. Remember what we started out the year with. Think about it.
No, I don't. I don't.
Think about
I
it.
block out the. I asked you. I asked a question. Give me an answer.
We just did the Time Meddler.
Oh yes, we did. And he had a working chameleon circuit. Yeah. I block out. I like classic Who's so bad. I block it out.
But yeah, I think that's interesting. I just remembered a note. Yeah, the Time Meddler was kind of like the prototype Master, the exact opposite of the Doctor. And also in episode second story we covered this year, another exact opposite to the Doctor, but this time he has his face. Interesting.
Yeah. And the Master approaches the circus master, and he's like, hey, you can call me the Master. I'm definitely a cool dude and not evil at all, and I'm going to hypnotize you now so that you can do everything I say. It's a fun way to introduce the Master as a villain. I think it's a lot of fun. And then we get some really amazing, and this is a recurring theme in this episode, is really spectacular, fantastic, almost like if you weren't paying close attention you wouldn't notice usage of blue screen. It's across the entire story. The blue screen is just, it's on point, it's fantastic, and it's such a good choice for them to have made.
So yeah, I was going to talk about this later, but I'll talk about it now. This story was the first story to really experiment with CSO, which stands for Color Separation Overlay, also known as chroma key back in the day. Basically now green screen. It was green screen of the day, but with the ability to change the backgrounds live, so the production crew could see the backgrounds while shooting the actual episode. A lot of CSO was apparently used because Barry Letts ran out of time during the location shoot. So that's why there's so much chroma key, just for people standing around in rooms sometimes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Although, what's really funny is that is the exact same reasoning I had to use so much green screen in my student film I made. Because when I was at college, I made a student film called Road Cop, which you can watch on youtube.com/massyoutube. It's a very funny movie. But there's like scenes where like people are like sitting in a bar or whatever, and it's all green screen because it was so close to the deadline to get the films done, and I could not get to time to film in a bar anywhere, so I was like, screw it, we're just going to do it on green screen. The movie's supposed to be like a B movie anyway, so it works that it's got this like jank green screen, but that was the entire reasoning, was I just don't have time to go to an actual pub, we need to just film this now.
I can understand Barry Letts' reasoning for using so much chroma key here, because if you're going to need a kitchen for like 2 seconds, why bother building a kitchen when you could just use it as green screen? Obviously, it doesn't look as good as it would live, but I can understand his reasoning. This is Barry Letts really
but then
like
you
to
should ask yourself, do you need the shot of a kitchen for 2 seconds? Is it that important to include?
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get to that shot of the kitchen later on. It just appears for like 2 seconds for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah, but the circus master like knocks out a security guard or something inside a room full of missiles. Where are they? Where what? Like,
Yeah, there is no link between the two scenes. We're just suddenly in some sort of museum or something. I don't know.
yeah.
What do you think of the master's theme as he's hypnotizing the ringleader?
I think it's fine. The music in this episode is sometimes overbearing and sometimes like a lot. But most of the time it blends pretty well into the themes and what you're seeing and stuff like that. So the soundtrack I don't think is too terrible in this story.
Yeah, this was another first for Doctor Who. This was the first time all of the music was done electronically. Dudley Simpson and Brian Hodgson would work at it. Dudley Simpson, by the way, composed the music for like 300 episodes of Doctor Who. So it's wild just to consider 300 episodes. Yeah,
That's so much.
Yeah, the electronic music was obviously done to keep costs down, and Dudley Simpson was very unhappy about it having no conventional instruments involved. The music sounds good here. I like the Master's theme.
I am a real big fan, and it's something that I kind of want them to bring back in Doctor Who, of pure electronic synth music. Just because, I love synth anyway. It's my favorite. Synth, I think, works so well on film and TV as a soundtrack. It just adds such a vibe to everything. And I want more of it, please.
Yeah, as I was saying, the music works here, but we've seen episodes where it turns out really bad, like the Sea Devils, where it's just noise. And there's moments later on where it just becomes noise as well, but again, not nearly as bad. Going back to hypnosis, the writer Robert Holmes came up with the hypnosis idea. But his idea was to give him a mind-dominating ray. So he'd just been carrying around the big gun, I guess, the entire time.
I guess you could kind of like make it like his version of the sonic screwdriver. Like if you think like John Sims' sonic screwdriver basically was just a sonic ray. It was like a big laser beam. If you wanted to go that way, but
it was a sonic ray that turned the Doctor into Gollum.
yeah, that's how it works. But I kind of like because all Time Lords are kind of semi like telepathic or whatever. They've got some power going on, but I like the Master being able to hypnotize people. That's why I really liked it in the Power of the Doctor when Sacha Dhawan started hypnotizing people. That was a great little callback.
Yeah, they go for a lot of classic tropes in Power of the Doctor, by the way. Like the disguise, probably the best disguise the Master has ever pulled off. Like here,
but I mean
in this episode, his disguise is, I'm just going to call myself Mr. Masters.
Yeah, but the Power of the Doctor itself is basically just a big love letter to classic Who anyway. So it's a fun episode.
It was a big love letter to classic Who in the way that it doesn't make fucking sense.
And it's kind of like not like it's kind of like underwhelming, but like fine, like it was fun. Like,
but yeah, I think the next scene shows off the perfect contrast between the Doctor and the Master, because we cut from the Master being such a lovely gentleman, basically, but at the same time evil, to the Doctor being just a total asshole to Joe. But yes, the hero of the story.
Yes, so the next scene we have is the Doctor working on some sort of experiment that catches fire as Joe comes into the room and she like puts it out and everything. And this is our introduction to Joe. We were saying before that this is our first time meeting the Master in the show. This is also our first time meeting Joe as a companion on the show. And it's an interesting way to introduce a companion, to have the Doctor call her a complete bumbling idiot. He's so mean to her, like right off the bat, because she stops this fire happening, and the Doctor's like, "It was supposed to be doing that. There was no fire." Even though he was like, "Oh my god," like he's such a dick.
But yeah, this introduction of Joe does what they intended to do by showing that she's a complete bumbling fool, basically. It's a complete opposite to the previous companion, Liz Shaw. Liz Shaw was actually dropped after the last season without a farewell scene, which is really
wow.
upsetting if you're a Liz Shaw fan, you know. Like,
Yeah,
it was
they just
because
they just say in this episode she went back to like Cambridge.
yeah. She was dropped because she was considered too smart of a character. The Doctor needs someone to explain things to for the audience, which you can just have Liz Shaw explain things to the Brigadier at the same time. Like, you don't need the Doctor to explain things all the time.
Yeah, you also you don't need to get rid of that companion. You could just add another companion. Like you could just add Joe in. You don't need to get rid of Liz as well. You could just add in Joe, who is like say like an intern under Liz's wing or whatever to learn. And the entire time she's like, "Oh, I'm just an idiot. I'm only here because my parents aren't kind of in charge." You know, like that's how she got the internship.
Yeah, we'll get to that whole nepotism thing, but yeah, no, let's just talk about the nepotism now. Like, why? I don't. Suddenly makes Joe kind of unlikable because she's only here because of nepotism. Like, it's a very serious role, isn't it?
You have to think. You have to think. This is the TV. You know, we're watching a TV program.
Yeah.
Everybody involved in creating this TV program is there because of nepotism. Like,
but yeah, true. But you know when. Yeah, but you know, nepotism in a role of a scientific advisor is a bit sus, and it makes me kind of. I love Joe Grant as a companion, but having her be a nepo baby basically in this important role is very strange. It's very complicated.
you're saying that in 1970, everybody got their job for legitimate reasons.
No, I
And
guess
no.
But back to the subject of Liz Shaw, I rewatched The Silurians last year because I haven't seen season 7 in a long time. And I watched The Silurians just because we were doing the Sea Devils. Remember the Sea Devils? We did it exactly 1 year ago.
We have talked about doing like the us
God's
doing
sake.
the Sea Devils like almost every week this year. Like we can't escape
I
them.
know.
They just keep coming back.
Somehow, the Sea Devils have returned. But yeah, in that episode, The Silurians, 7 episodes long, all I remember Liz Shaw doing is the Doctor tells her to go get some beakers at one point because she has to go study something, and then she spends most of the time off screen. They just did not know how to write Liz Shaw, a smart character.
Yeah, not just a smart character, a smart woman. Oh my god, it's impossible to write in Classic Who. It makes no sense.
So Joe Grant was designed to be the complete opposite of Liz Shaw. Joe was scatterbrained and cuddly and fun, according to Doctor Who magazine in the 80s, whereas Liz Shaw was a scientist who was very professional and somewhat emotionally guarded. Originally, Joe was going to be given an official title of lieutenant, but it was dropped for whatever reason. I guess it's because women can't be lieutenants.
I don't think she needs the title. You know, Lieutenant Joe Grant. It just seems like a mouthful. Also, you know, if we're talking 1970, surely it should be lieutenant if we're doing proper British English.
I guess.
You know, because that is how it's pronounced. Is lieutenant. Lieutenant is American. There you go. There's a fun military fact.
So there were 300 applicants and 60 people were interviewed for the role of Joe Grant.
Jesus.
One thing you have to know about Katie Manning is she is incredibly short-sighted and gets flustered very easily. She was late to the rehearsal because she accidentally went to the BBC television centre instead of Barry Letts' office. And when she got to Barry Letts' office, she couldn't fucking read the script at all.
Oh my god.
And basically... basically Barry Letts decided to continue the interview because her personality just seemed to fit, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you know, you're trying to cast a bumbling idiot of a character, and then this lady comes along. I feel like it's like a match made in heaven.
Yeah. Yeah, in real life, basically Katie Manning is Joe Grant. There is no difference between the two characters, especially whenever Joe Grant returns to Doctor Who nowadays, you know, whether it's the Sarah Jane Adventures, she seems more scatterbrained than she did in the classic series.
You know, that's the joy of it, though, isn't it? Because you've got the nostalgia kick of her coming back, and then you can, like, turn up the dial to, like, 11 or so of what her character was like, just exaggerate it a bit. So, because, like, everybody will, like, inflate it in their memory of like, oh yeah, she was such a huge idiot, even though she wasn't that big of a stupid person in the show. You know, she has like a few bumbling moments here and there, but the way that they remember the character is her being this big goofus, and so that you could just expand on that whenever she comes back into other mediums.
And speaking of other mediums, you know, we just recently saw her come back in Doctor Who itself, and for a short cameo at the end of Power of the Doctor. She recently filmed that little trailer for Series 9 Blu-ray, which was lovely to see. And then she also came back in a recent Third Doctor Adventures audio series, which we were confused about whether or not it would mention the Sarah Jane Adventures. I listened to a trailer this morning, and it does mention the Sarah Jane Adventures. Basically, Joe Grant is like, the last time I met you, you were like a young man with a bow tie. And John, the Third Doctor's basically like, oh, a bow tie. I like the sound of that. My style still hasn't gone off. Which, the idea of the Third Doctor approving of the 11th Doctor's outfit is lovely. I like that.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. That's really fun.
So John Pertwee would often drive Katie Manning to her work, and the two actors created such a natural bond. Sometimes he'd even take her on his motorbike, which sounds amazing. I love the idea of that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But our episode continues as we cut away to some large science tower facility that's definitely in the sky and not in a studio against a blue screen. That would be crazy. Where a man is talking about how eggs make him fart a lot. And like the egg conversation has nothing to do with anything. I don't know why it's there.
No, the egg conversation makes me think that Robert Holmes' wife packed too many eggs in his lunchbox, and he was just like, "Oh, I fucking hate eggs. I'm gonna write out my anger," you know. Because
it's a shame.
There's no reason for it to be in here.
There's no reason for it at all. The scientist brings it up for no reason. But I really like eggs, you know. I like hard-boiled eggs as well, but like if you're thinking it's too bland or whatever, add some salt to it.
Yeah,
you know, get some pepper, you know, like season it up.
Or ask her to just make it in a sandwich or something like that. I don't know. But it is a
Yeah.
very 1970s thing for a man to be complaining about his wife making lunch, you know?
Yeah, it's also a very 1970s thing to have no seasoning on anything.
Yeah.
Nothing is allowed flavor.
It's not just a 1970s thing, it's a British thing.
Yeah.
So these two men are Christopher Burgess and Andrew Staines, and they were both in Enemy of the World, which we covered last year. Christopher Burgess is a man with a hair. He was the guy who discovered Salamander's lie because of a newspaper. And the scientist dude played a sergeant in that same story, which is interesting because we just covered that story. It's wild coincidence.
It is. It is a fun coincidence. I guess
I guess it's not a coincidence because the same director directed this story, you know.
Yeah. I didn't recognize the newspaper guy in this because if I remember in the Enemy of the World, in that he's bald.
Yeah.
Whereas in this he's got hair, and also in this he's got very thick glasses. Yeah. So they do a good job in that you like would not recognize his face at all.
Yeah. And also he was in black and white. You know, now he's in color. It's a different medium altogether.
But they come up and they're basically talking about nothing. They're like, "Get me that science thing with science," and the scientist is like, "I hate eggs," and then they leave.
The guy with the glasses is like, "Speaking of eggs, get this report done for me tomorrow." And it's like, that has nothing to do with eggs. What are you talking about?
Yeah, absolutely nothing to do with eggs. But then when
speaking of eggs, then the master returns comes in.
Yeah, but that ties in because the scientist is eating eggs at that point. And the master, I assume, kills this man. He like pulls out like a I guess it's like a mini gun and just kind of blasts his head, and then the guy vanishes. Is this a dude he shrinks down?
Yeah, this is the dude he shrinks down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he shrinks this dude down.
You have very little recollection of this episode, my dude.
It sucked. This episode sucked. Like, but yeah, he shrinks the dude down as the scientist continues, and at this point, the master starts doing weird stuff in the tower as the soundtrack is going ballistic. Like the master is like winding up some device onto something. He's doing like just some gibberish, really, and the soundtrack is just going like, Jesus Christ, calm down.
Yeah, that's when it feels like the soundtrack to the Sea Devils to me.
Yeah, it gets really overbearing.
One thing you skipped over was when the Master pulls out his gun, the camera decides to zoom in on the Master, which is one thing you should never ever do when you're shooting against green screen, because the entirety of the green screen moves with it. It looks hideous.
It is awful. But, you know, to give them their credit, a 1970s audience is not going to notice something like that.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
they would also not notice the outline when characters are standing in front of it because, you know, in 1970, the TV reception is incredibly poor, and often you just get ghosting images on the TV. Like, when I was a kid, I had, like, an indoor aerial. It was a very tiny indoor aerial. I'm sorry?
You grew up in 1970? Did you grow up in 1970?
When I was a kid in the early 2000s, I had a tiny indoor aerial, and I would often just get like ghostly outlines with all the people on screen. So if I was watching it this episode with a tiny little indoor aerial, I would not have noticed. And also it was on my like 12-inch screen.
Yeah. So they could get away with a lot more back then. Plus, also like audiences in general just were not as knowledgeable about how TV and films are made, you know, so they like if they see like a blue outliner on something, they're not really going to think about like, oh, that's a fake background that they've put in with computers. They're going to be like, oh, that's weird, if they notice it at all, you know, because they don't know what it is. Whereas nowadays everybody has a computer, everybody's got a camera, everybody has editing software, you know, like everybody knows the basics when it comes to film production.
I mean, also, like, half the country was still watching television in black and white around this time. More than half, actually. So they probably wouldn't have noticed it either way.
Then we cut back to the Doctor complaining about Joe Grant to the Brigadier, and the Brigadier's basically explaining Joe's entire character, where he's like, she's a big bumbling idiot. You said you would want a big bumbling idiot, so we got you one. And the Doctor's like, I don't want to work with her. You got to send her away. And the Brigadier's like, okay, if that's what you want, but you have to tell her. And I really liked this scene because when the Doctor goes to tell her, he's like, yes, well, I guess it's going to be great working with you, Joe. You know, he can't bring himself, as mean and as rude as he is to Joe when he meets him, he can't bring himself to actually, like, you know, hurt her in any genuine way or send her away, crush her. He's too nice even to his core, you know.
Yeah. I'm glad we just don't make the Doctor too mean towards her, because I would leave such a bad impression for a very first appearance of her. Like, the audience would probably hate her as well eventually. So you've got to add a bit of niceness to it as well.
It's also like, I don't know how I feel about the introduction of her character being, we got you somebody to just pass you beakers and ask questions. You know, we got you a dumb lady to just ask you things because that's what you wanted. You didn't want a smart lady, you wanted a dumb lady, so here is one. I don't know how I feel about that as an introduction to a character, you know?
Yeah, it is a bit outdated, I would say, yeah.
Yeah. So the Doctor and the Joe and that all decide that they need to go to the big tower where everything was weird. And they were where the like scientist guy that really hated eggs was, and then they're about to go up to it, and the Doctor's like, "No, everybody stay behind. I'm just going up by myself. Why did I drive you here? Don't worry about it." And he gets up and he's about to step inside to the science building when a man teleports into the sky. It's some more fantastic and not at all terrible blue screen.
Yeah.
Where another Time Lord appears out of thin air. Like, there's the TARDIS noise, but we don't see a ship. We don't see, like, you thought he was like a projection or a hologram. I just assumed he was like teleporting down. But whatever he's doing, it makes no sense because he's literally standing in the sky until he like zooms in and becomes bigger.
You know, in cartoons when people walk off a cliff and then suddenly they're like floating in midair, and then suddenly they look down and then they fall.
Yeah.
I want this to happen here. I don't know how the Time Lord is floating. It's very strange. But
it's so bad.
The whole idea of the Time Lord warning the Doctor about an arch enemy that's here is going to be repeated again in Genesis of the Daleks. We're going to see that next month.
Great.
And this Time Lord is basically dressed like a character from the Avengers, not the American Avengers, but like the British Avengers.
Yeah, he's got like a bowler hat and suit on.
Yeah, and also, was it a walking cane or is it an umbrella?
It doesn't matter. You know, he's like, you know, he sucks. He sucks so much. He's so boring, and the green screen is so distracting.
There is no reason for him to be here to warn the Doctor that the Master is here, because, you know, the Doctor should sense the Master is near.
Wouldn't it be a more exciting reveal of the Master as a villain for the Doctor to see him and go, "Oh my God, how could you be here?" You know.
Yeah.
And then you're left with the intrigue of, wait, the Doctor knows who this guy is? These guys have a history? Rather than Mr. fucking bowler hat Magoo coming down and being like, oh, the Master's coming, you better watch out. And the Doctor being like, oh yes, the Master, he's one of my worst enemies of all time. I hated him. Where, like, you know, just saying it to us rather than showing it to us, you know? I like, it's so bad. I hate it.
Yeah.
I hate this scene. I hate this scene so much. Like,
But also, I like this scene because it shows how awful the fucking Time Lords are. They just often warn the Doctor of danger, but they don't do fucking shit about it. You know, oh yeah, the Doctor, there's a bomb in this room that I could easily teleport myself into, but I won't. You have to solve a bomb issue by yourself.
You have to dive into this room and hope you catch the bomb or explode. It's so stupid. So stupid. But yeah, the Master has rigged up like a tripwire device on a bomb inside the room. The Doctor runs in to grab it and successfully does so. Then he disarms the bomb in a fantastic scene because he's sitting disarming the bomb as a unit soldier comes in and is like, oh my God, there's a bomb. Have you defused it? And like they start talking, and then like another guy comes into the room and he starts talking as well. And the entire time we're just looking at the Doctor. We do not see who these people are that are talking. We do not know where the voices are coming from. It's insane that we just follow the Doctor and we don't see. It's for like a solid like 40-50 seconds. We do not see the people talking at all. It's wild.
Yeah, this happens for almost a minute. My theory is maybe there was a technical fault with one of the cameras that was, you know, shot towards the two people entering the room. That's my only theory. Like, maybe it wasn't working, or maybe they couldn't get the shot in time, and they had to keep on John Pertwee for an incredibly long amount of time. Like,
maybe they were just trying to maybe they were trying to minimize the amount of blue screen they had to use in the scene, because obviously the soldier and the scientist guy are standing next to the window.
Yeah, that's possible.
Which and it looks atrocious. But they figure out that the scientist is missing and he must have left in a hurry. But then they look inside the lunchbox and, oh my God, little chef from or little cook from Big Cook Little Cook is here. As he's hiding inside the lunchbox because the Master has shrunk him down. And it looks okay. Like, it's very much a dated effect. It's a very dated effect, but it is far and away probably one of the better looking effects in the entire episode.
This took hours for them to figure out the best way of doing the little man. They eventually realised it looked wrong without a shadow, so they placed a paper shadow for him to basically sit on. And yeah, this took hours trying to figure this out. This is why they ran out of location time, I think, because they just spent so much time just working on this, which is a shame.
Yeah, and it's fun though. It's like a fun effect that, like, especially in like 1970s TV, is not an effect you would have seen like pretty much anywhere. You know, it would have been like, oh, this is cool. Like, what a cool idea that they've done here. You know, it's just aged relatively badly.
Yeah, but it still looks fairly good enough. You know, in other, you know, whenever the Master would shrink people in future episodes, they'd basically turn into little dolls instead of like the chroma key that you use here.
Which is what Sacha Darwin does as well. Makes them into little dolls. Which I like more as an idea. I like that more as an idea.
I kind of like the little man more, but I guess you could think of, why did the little man die? I guess it's because he put him in a lunchbox with no air holes.
Yeah.
He was just smelling eggs the entire time.
But we then cut to the Master, who is inside like the plastic factory or the science factory, or wherever the science factory where they manufacture science.
Factory.
No, science factory where they manufacture science.
And the Master's new best friend is Michael Wisher, who is going to be the the guy who plays Davros next month. We're going to cover Genesis of a Dalek, and he becomes Davros. You'd never figure it out here.
No, that's cool. But it's a minor scene where the Master's just like, oh, I love working in this factory made of plastic. You know who I am, yes, because he's like hypnotized this guy or whatever. And we then cut to the Doctor and Joe back at Unit Head HQ, where the Doctor is explaining the Nestine, which are the Autons, aren't they? Like the Nestine consciousness, which explaining.
This whole scene reminds me of when we did the Sea Devils. So much of episode 1 of the Sea Devils was the Doctor basically explaining what the Silurians were. It's the same thing here. Mm-hmm. I mean, also, it's the same thing because Terror of the Autons is basically Spearhead from space. It's the same story, except with the Master included. The Sea Devils was the same story as the Silurians, except with the Master included. So...
Great. But yeah, it basically explains that there are aliens that like to plastic, and that's it. But it goes on for ages. He also sticks the bomb that he's got into a box and puts big letters on it called bomb. Don't worry, that'll come back later. Then did I miss something? Why does Joe start spying on the Master, and how does she know where he is?
Okay, first of all, you missed out one of the best jokes when the Brigadier walks in and he's like, oh, I've run out of all the ideas.
Yeah.
I can't figure out where the Autons could be. And the Doctor's like, have you tried the plastic place? And the Brigadier's like, oh no, I didn't think of that. It's like the first place you'd think of.
Yeah. Which is great. But why would they send Joe to do this? Because they've already established that she's a bumbling buffoon.
So the original script would have had Joe do nothing the entire episode, which is surprising because usually they're so good at writing female characters.
Usually the companions have so much work to do. That's really strange.
This was at a request by Terrence Dix, who just asked Robert Holmes to basically beef up her character, give her something to do, get hypnotized, and be more weak to the story.
Yeah, because she's like spying on the Master and gets caught immediately. And it's just the Master's like, cool, I'll take you back and I'll hypnotize you. This is easy. This is good for me. Which is, it's an interesting idea to have the companion in her first episode become a bad guy.
Yeah, which they don't do anything with, It would be more interesting if she remained hypnotized the entire story, and we as an audience don't know she's hypnotized. That'd be more interesting, I would think. Mm-hmm. But during the hypnosis scene, as the Master is hypnotizing Joe, Roger Delgado just kept on pulling silly faces to try and make her break character, which I love him.
Great. That's great. That's super. But we then, after Joe gets hypnotized, we get to a scene that I feel is extremely important, with these two businessmen talking about one of the guy's dads and how he's retired, and how that the guy should contact him, but he wants to contact him, but he shouldn't because he's retired, and this other guy's in charge now. God damn it! This is a really long, boring scene, basically being like, I can't believe Colonel Masters is here. Wait, who's Colonel Masters? That guy doesn't exist. Yes, he does. I just met him. And it sucks. But eventually it leads to this dude who's brainwashed.
I do like the little moment where Michael Wisher is looking through like the little the little. What do you fucking call it?
Like employee records, whatever.
Yeah, and he's looking for Colonel Masters.
Colonel Masters.
Like, but I could have sworn it was here. I'd be interested to just see his like mind break at the idea of, I know he's here, but he's hypnotized, but he can't physically find the Colonel Masters thing. I'd be interested to see his mind kind of break because of that, but it goes nowhere.
Yeah, it does go nowhere. He just goes to see the Master, and the Master's like, hi, friend.
But I think this little drama about the dad owning the company and now the son is inheriting the role.
Garbage. Oh
it was apparently because Terrence Dix wanted more drama to the story that wasn't just action. And so I guess Robert Holmes was like, maybe I could do something with the plastic man. It goes nowhere.
But the dude goes to see the Master, who is definitely standing in a factory, definitely standing in a laboratory, definitely not in a horrendous looking green screen. as he's like working on his Autons, which let's speak about this Auton design. I kind of dig it. I think it's kind of cool looking. I like they're like kind of spooky. Like if I was a kid in 1970, I think I would have been pretty spooked by the look of the Autons. I think them having air holes under their noses is hilarious because why does living plastic need to breathe? Obviously the person in the suit needs to breathe. But
Yeah.
I think it's funny. I think the updated version of them in the Doctor Who, the first episode of Doctor Who, when it came back with them being the mannequins, was great. Good idea. Obviously not the first time that the Autons were mannequins, because that's happened before in Classic Who, hasn't it?
The Autons look pretty decent here, yeah.
I think they look cool.
So yeah, this scene is only included because it was written hastily at the last minute because we realized that they couldn't call it Terror of the Autons and not have them appear in episode 1. So like they weren't going to be in episode 1 apparently, which is interesting to say the least.
That's not shocking though, because episode 1 sucks. But the Autons go to kill the science guy and the Master stops them. And then we've got a box arrives at Unit HQ and they're trying to open it up, and Joe's like, oh yes, we should definitely open this up, and the Doctor's like, wait, no, that's a bomb, because I guess the Doctor just knows instantly that it's a bomb, and then Joe karate punches a unit guy in the stomach and then opens up the box, and then we just cut to the credits. The episode's over now, done. This episode really drags out its ending. Like I do not think this episode needs to be 24 minutes long. It could be 22 easily. And the cliffhanger sucks ass. I think this is a really weak episode overall. I did not have a good time with this episode. I had a good time laughing at this episode with the bad effects. Like that made it enjoyable for me, but like the actual story and structure of this episode sucked.
There is no real plot to it other than the Master is here and he's trying to thingy the Autons. This cliffhanger sucks, as you said, because there is no tension because the Doctor's like, stop, bomb, and then we have 20 seconds just watching Joe open the box. We know the Doctor is going to arrive at the box and close it or throw it out. At least cut to black and have an explosion sound effect so we don't know what happened to them. Like, that would be way more intense, but instead we just see Joe lightly open the box and then it cuts. And it's like, yeah, we know the Doctor's going to close it, so what's the point? A weak cliffhanger for sure.
Definitely a weak cliffhanger. A kind of a weak introduction to the Autons. A fun, if underwhelming introduction to both Joe and the Master.
Yeah.
It's just, this episode's just weak in general in like every aspect.
Yeah. It's always my problem with the Master. I love Roger Delgado as a Master, but I just don't. I prefer to see him work on his own because every time he's introduced in the Pertwee era, he's always working with another villain.
Yeah.
And then, but I guess if he has to work with a villain, I guess it works. But it's the Autons because the Autons have no agency as like characters of their own. We're just independent. We're just mindless drones, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all just like faceless plastic under the command of the like nesting consciousness or whatever the fuck. It's fine. It's a fine episode. Part 2 is a lot more fun, but also not great. And we are going to jump into it right now.
You're a magician as well as a colonel, eh?
I am many things.
Aye, well, that's as may be, but you're not a director of this company, Colonel Masters. I am in charge of production here, and I answer only to Mr. Farrell and his father.
Look, why don't you try it?
Well, you'll never sell that, I'll tell you that for nothing. Sure, it looks like a black pudding.
Try sitting in it.
It's got a cool, clammy feel to it. Now, plastic should be warm and dry to the touch.
Sit down.
It's moving.
No, I will not tolerate his insults.
Sylvia, will you check Mr. McDermott's entitlement on termination of employment, please?
Episode 2 begins with an amazing continuation of the amazing cliffhanger we had in episode 1, where the Doctor grabs the bomb, he throws it out a window, and it explodes into a nearby river. It's thrilling.
It's a river that's not usually outside the unit base, because the last time we covered a unit era story was the 3 Doctors, and we're nowhere near a river. We're just in the countryside somewhere.
John Pertwee just threw it really far. Like it was a really good throw. And then they spend a long time trying to snap Jo out of her hypnotization. Is that a word? Hypnotization.
I don't know. I don't think so. It doesn't sound right.
Hypnotization.
Trance.
Let's
just say
find out.
trance.
Hypnotization is a word. Get fucked. They try to snap her out of that, and the Doctor explains in an excruciatingly amount of detail exactly what hypnosis is and how it works, and that if you are hypnotized, then you can do anything that the other person wills. It's not just what you would already do under your own guise, so you could force people to like murder somebody, and even if they wouldn't murder somebody normally, and it goes on for ages. It sucks. Yeah. It sucks so hard.
I'm sure most kids watching Doctor Who would know what hypnotizing people was, you know. Like,
yeah.
I don't understand why we make such a big deal out of it. I feel like we've done hypnotized stories before this. And also, you know, comic books, it would be a big thing for kids in the 70s. Like, we know what it was. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it sucks. It's bad. And then, speaking of bad, we then cut to the Master talking with one of the factory people that was upset about the guy's dad or something from last episode. And he's like, hey, look at this cool couch I've got. It's inflatable. And the guy's like, I don't care if it's an inflatable couch. It looks like crap. He says it looks like a black pudding, which I don't know what black puddings looked like in 1970, but apparently they look like sofas. And the Master's like, you should sit on it. You should sit on this cool couch that I've got. Just try it out. You'll really like it. And the guy eventually sits on it, and then the couch really slowly deflates and eats him, and it is hilarious. It is so bad. It is amazing. Like
we spend about 20 seconds watching it inflate.
So long.
I mean, it took about 20 seconds watching it deflate. It was originally
the guy
scripted,
sitting there like oh no,
which apparently scared kids of the 70s. Interestingly enough, you know.
Of course it did. They got scared by everything apparently in classic Doctor Who. Like.
But yeah, obviously that scene was shot in reverse. You can kind of see it. But it was originally scripted for a plastic to mold itself into the shape of the man's body and wrap him from the waist up, and then reform itself back into an armchair with McDermott sitting in it dead.
Jesus Christ.
Which
that was ambitious. An ambitious idea.
Yeah, which obviously wasn't in the budget, but it would probably be more terrifying than it was already, just to see a dead body just sitting there in the sofa. You know?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't terrifying the way that they did it, so, you know, any alternative way of doing it would be more scary.
But, you know, if you were five in the 1970s, and your imagination would run wild because you would never be able to see this episode again for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And your imagination would make it so much worse than it actually was. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, for sure. We then cut back to the Doctor and Jo, and she's still hypnotized, and it still goes on for ages, until eventually she snaps out of her hypnosis, and the Doctor's like, where were you when you got hypnotized? And Jo really badly describes where she was. She's like, I was in a room, and there was a table and a telephone, and the Doctor's like, was it an office? Was it, like, he's just trying to guess because she's doing such a terrible job of explaining this. But eventually they get out that it was like a factory office or whatever, and then we cut away again. This episode sucks and nothing is happening. And then, speaking of things sucking, we are with the factory man and his dad, who's now arrived, and the Master, and the dad's like, you guys all suck, you're doing my business wrong, I'm going to come out of retirement and do my business better. And the Master's like, I'm going to hypnotize you, and the guy's like, you can't hypnotize me, I'm too cool. and it sucks. I do not like the fact that in the second episode with the Master, there's already somebody that's like, haha, your hypnosis sucks. Like, already taking the wind out of the Master's sails. He's no longer that threatening if this random dude can stop the hypnosis. Like,
it also feels like the Master just kind of wandered onto the set of like Twin Peaks or something, but without all the supernatural elements. Just feels like he just wandered on the set of a soap opera. Like, this is EastEnders right now. Like, it's a big drama between a father and a son running the company. And it's like, why is this part of the plot, and why is the Master involved? Like, why doesn't there's so many people who just come into this fucking room for a Master to either hypnotize or kill.
It sucks. It's so bad. But the Master decides that, you know, if he can't hypnotize this dude, he's going to have to find another way of getting rid of him. He goes out to his car and he turns the heating on. And then, like, the old man comes out and he's like, hey, do you want to have this hideous doll? And the old man's like, why would I want that? It's awful looking. And it is awful looking. It's hilarious how awful it looks. And the Master's like, you can have it. And he just puts it into the back seat of the old man's car. And the old man doesn't, like, go like, oh, no, I don't want it. And, like, takes it away. Or just drives off for a little bit and then takes out the car and throws it in the rubbish. He's just like, I guess I have this doll now. And drives away with it. And that doll, oh boy, does it have some amazing comedy. But before that happens, we cut back to Unit HQ where still nothing is happening, but this time for longer periods, as Joe comes in and she's like, has any story happened yet, Doctor? And the Doctor's like, no. And then the Brigadier comes in and he's like, has any story happened yet? And then they're like, no. And then another dude comes in. I think is it Sergeant Yates that comes in?
Yep.
I'm learning names. Look at that. He comes in and he's like, has any story happened? And everyone's like, nope. And it sucks. Like,
Speaking of Mike Yates, this is his introduction to Doctor Who. He's a third main character now. He was originally supposed to be a dashing young love interest for Joe Grant, and you'll see them kind of flirt at the end of this scene where Mike Yates is like, "What's wrong, Joe?" And then Joe's like, "Oh, the Doctor will never believe in me," or whatever the fuck she talks about. I wasn't paying attention. But yeah, they wanted to attract the teenage market and just like build up a love interest. However, it was decided that the relationship would have conflicted with the relationship between Joe and the Doctor, so this was dropped, which was a shame, I would say, because I feel like relationships conflicting allows you to write drama, which creates compelling television. Yeah, like
maybe
the Doctor's maybe you could have a scene where the Doctor's life is in danger, and if Joe was there next to the Doctor rather than a date with Mike Yates, Joe could have saved the Doctor in that situation, and she feels guilty about it. That's some drama right there, you know.
Yeah,
and also, it would give something for Joe to do other than do stuff with the Doctor, like have a relationship with Mike Yates instead. That would be more interesting, I think.
It makes me think of Amy and Rory.
Yeah.
You know, where Amy had this relationship with the Doctor where she kind of liked him and wanted to impress him all the time, but also she had this relationship with Rory where Rory loved her and she loved Rory, you know, and it caused a lot of conflict because Rory was like uncomfortable with the Doctor's relationship with Amy, or he felt like unworthy at times, you know, but eventually they get over that and they have character arcs and they grow and they form, and it creates compelling television. Who would have thought? Who thought that was possible? That's wild.
Yeah, in the classic series especially, the companions don't have a life outside of the Doctor. Give Joe a life outside of the Doctor, please.
Yeah.
But, you know, in her last episode, she gets married off to somebody who she just basically met, because that's how they write off characters in the 70s. But you ever get thrown away without a scene, without a farewell scene, or they get married, like Susan or Joe, you know?
God. Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad.
Ian Marter was originally considered for Mike Yates, but he hadn't realised he was auditioning for a series regular, so he dropped out. Barry Letts would later cast him in a small role for Carnival of Monsters, and then again as Harry Sullivan, who was a companion for Tom Baker's first season, and we shall cover an Ian Marter story with Genesis of the Daleks next month. You know, it's all connected. Like, there's so many guest stars from Enemy of the World, which covered last month, and now there's so many guest stars from, you know, Genesis of the Daleks who we're covering next month. It's very strange.
It's like poetry, it rhymes. But we then cut to the old man who's sweating buckets as he definitely really drives this car. And the doll in the back, which is definitely a doll in the back and not a man in a suit, starts to come to life and move around until the old man is like, oh wait, why am I sweating? I could just turn off my heating and open the window, which makes the doll lie back down. What a worthwhile scene that was.
I know, but it does communicate to the audience that these Autons
that the doll can come alive. Yeah.
Through the method of like heat. It's heat activated. The troll doll was actually recorded on video disc to make his movements jerky when played back at speed. The costume apparently arrived late, and it kept falling apart, so we had to constantly glue it together, meaning that Tommy Reynolds, who was in the suit, had to suffer by smelling glue fumes for the entire shoot, basically.
Great.
Which sounds
I'm sure
wonderful.
he was having a good time.
The original idea for this troll was it would have been given away as a prize to lucky winners at the fun fair. So it'd be like, it would be given towards people, and it would be used as a means to control the world, basically, to strangle people to death. Which, that's why the carnival is here, and it's never brought up again, really. It's very strange.
Yeah. It's also a hideous looking doll, like just the outfit and the costume. It looks so bad.
Apparently, these kind of troll dolls was given out to people back in like the 60s or 70s. It looks hideous, but I guess
I think that's the charm. I guess, like, some people like to get like ugly dolls because they are ugly. As a kid, we had physical, what they called trolls with a Z dolls, those kind of dolls. Mm-hmm. And now they just rebooted Trolls, but they made them look cute for some reason. Those two Trolls movies. Yes.
I don't understand why. It just defeats the purpose.
There's still ugly things out there. Like, you can get like the pillows with like teeth and stuff in them, and people like to have weird looking stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, this is an instance of adding CGI into the Blu-ray release, where the troll doll moving is actually CGI, which does look pretty decent, considering much better than the actual troll doll moving in the original shoot.
Yeah, interesting. That's I guess a cool idea. So the episode continues as the master is like, I'm going to send the doctor to the circus so he can explode. And that's exactly what happens. The doctor goes to the circus, and we see some awful animal abuse as there is a man making elephants dance, and he's got a giant whip, and it's disgusting, and it's honestly, it upsets me quite a bit.
Who else it upsets? It upset Katie Manning quite a bit. Doctor Who magazine from the 90s says that Katie Manning enjoyed her day immensely, which was a complete fucking lie, because in reality she was horrified because of the treatment of the animals. So John Pertwee decided to cheer up Katie by making up voices of the animals and saying how happy they were to be there, which is weird. I don't know how to feel about that.
That is strange, but circuses using animals it's awful. It's genuinely disgusting.
Yeah.
It's oh my god.
Yeah, and also, this episode is kind of a commercial for the circus, which is weird.
Which, I enjoy the circus. Like, when I was a kid in school, because I am a super cool dude, I went to a club that taught circus performing.
Christ,
I did stilt walking, I did juggling, I did all that stuff, and it was great. It's so much fun. But the forcing an animal to do it is not fun. Yeah. That's just cruelty. It's like, it's the same idea of using animals in film. It's totally okay to use an animal in film as long as you're not hurting that animal. And this is something that the 1970s really, really sucks with, because you could be like creating the most amazing art film ever, but in your film you're like, and a frog explodes. That's cool. You could fake a frog exploding. You have no reason to actually explode a frog, because a frog does not give a crap about your movie you're making. It does not know what a movie is. You're just blowing up a frog. It's awful. It's complete. It's just not considering these animals to be beings that have feelings. You know, it's seeing them as lesser and just like tools to be used. It really upsets me.
But, you know, at least Doctor Who is treating the animals more fairly than, you know, a production like Milo and Otis. Have you ever heard of Milo and Otis?
I've not, no.
Milo and Otis was a Japanese movie about a cat and a dog. And there were numerous allegations of animal cruelty made against the movie makers. Claims from crew members that 20 or so kittens were killed during the filming. So yeah, it's an infamous movie for that reason, which is yikes.
Yeah, there was a movie that I watched. It was a genuinely very good movie, but there were parts of it that really, really, really annoyed me. Oh god, I don't remember what it was called, but it's The Quest for the Holy Mountain or something. It's like a 1970s art film. It's like a psychedelic trip movie. But in it, they do blow up frogs in that movie, and they even have dogs. They make dogs fight, and oh my god, it really annoyed me. Like,
I recently watched Dumbo because the Talking Simpsons crew, what cartoon, did a review of Dumbo, and the whole movie is about how animal abuse is bad, I think. I don't remember Dumbo that well. I just watched it like a month ago. Barely remember the movie. There's no plot. But Dumbo's mum dies, and that's a heartbreaking scene, you know.
Yeah.
When was the last time you went to a circus, by the way?
I went to the circus a few times as a kid. I don't remember the exact time. I must have been maybe 11 or 12 years old, because it was the one time I remember clearly. I went with my dad. So like it was like the only time I've really seen him in my life was when I was like 11, 12. So I remember being at the circus, and for whatever reason. And, like, I don't know, because, like, even as a kid and I was sitting there, I was like, this isn't that funny. Why am I laughing so much? But there were, like, whenever the clowns were out and they were doing stuff, I was dead. Like, I was in complete stitches. And I had no idea why I was finding it funny. I was like, nobody else is really laughing as much as I am. Like, I am, like, in tears of laughter. And I had no idea what came over me. But the clowns just clicked. I just loved it. Like, it was a great time.
I almost had the exact opposite experience. The last time I went to the circus, I was probably like 12, and the clown. I was like in the front row with my mum and my nana, and I was a clown. Basically was trying to shake hands with me, and I was fucking terrified of this clown for whatever reason. Like, I was thinking the clown wanted me to go out and, you know, tightrope or something. I was so terrified
go out and
no reason. He just wanted a handshake or something. I was terrified.
Yeah, no, it's... I really like the spectacle of, like, the circus, you know, especially because they, like, you know, big tent, you get the lights and the people doing the trapeze. Like, it's amazing to watch. I do not know where the nearest circus is, or when it is, like, or if there's even a circus still coming around to these parts. It's been so long since I even seen a flyer for one, you know.
It used to be all the time at Aberdeen Beach, but I'm not sure if it happens anymore. I'm not sure. I don't remember when. I guess we have to go to the circus next time we see it.
We should, we should go. Next time it comes to town, we should go to the circus. It'd be a great time. I love it. I'd love it. I genuinely would go. That'd be great.
Let's go. Let's do it.
But then we cut to old people in a house, and it sucks. They're just talking about how much they hate the doll, and nothing really happens. Don't worry about them.
Fucking hideous house.
It is all. It's so 1970s, isn't it? We cut back to the circus, and the doctor's flagged the master's TARDIS. He's like, "Oh boy, I that's a TARDIS for sure." But before he can go inside it, he gets captured by the big wig dude in charge of the circus and the strongman of the circus, who's called Tony.
Yeah, Tony. One thing we should mention, he's black and he's a strong silent type, which is... we were complimenting Doctor Who on its casting of a black actor just last month, you know. But that woman did really well in that role, and it was a proper role, meaty role. And here, Tony is just a nobody, just a strong, silent, kind of obedient slave. And he was in Tomb of the Cybermen as Toberman, a strong, obedient, silent slave. So, what are your thoughts on this?
You know, probably the same as everybody's disappointment, but not shocked. I'm glad that they hired him again. I'm glad that he got paid. I'm glad that he got work. I'm glad he got to be on television. I am annoyed they didn't give him anything to do.
Yeah.
Like not even a line of dialogue.
In Tomb of the Cybermen, he at least gets somewhat of an arc where he gets brainwashed by the Cybermen, and then at the end he kind of fights the brainwash, and he kind of defeats... You remember that scene where I think he holds up a Cyberman above his head or something, and he throws it to the ground.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but... So I did some research on this actor, and he actually had an interesting life. This is Roy Stewart. He was born in 1925 in Jamaica. He came to Britain in the 40s to study to become a doctor, but he wound up doing theatre work where he realised there weren't really any black stunt people in the industry. He wound up opening his multiracial gym in 1954, and one of the regulars at this gym, one of the regular bodybuilders, was David Prowse. Does that name ring a bell?
I feel like it should, but it's not.
Think Star Wars.
Okay, I'm thinking about Star Wars.
He is a guy in Darth Vader's suit.
Ah, right. Okay.
He is Darth Vader, and this is another connection to Star Wars. Last month we had another connection to Star Wars, which is interesting.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
He also opened a nightclub during the 60s or 70s, and Jimi Hendrix, Van Morrison, and Bob Marley were frequent customers, which is cool as hell. He also owned a Caribbean restaurant in London for 40 years till his death in 2008 at the age of 83.
This was a busy man.
Yeah. This restaurant is still open to this day, and it's called The Globe. It's one of the longest running nightclubs in London, which is an incredibly successful life for this man. He sounds cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That's super cool. He does sound like a super cool dude. He saw a huge gap in the market and grabbed that opportunity.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted to do some research on this dude. He sounded interesting as hell, and it's a shame. I don't think he ever did like any documentaries on or interviews on any of the Doctor Who DVDs or anything like that. It's a shame he didn't do that.
Yeah, it sounds like a really interesting man for sure. It's cool that his like restaurant/club thing is still open. That's a neat thing.
We should go.
Yeah, that's cool. I hate clubs.
Same. I'm glad you agree.
But the Doctor's getting interrogated by this dude, and really there's not any substance here. It's just, the guy being like, I'm here to stop you doing what you're doing, Doctor. And the Doctor's like, I could bribe you. And the guy's like, you've got no money, lol. And Joe's in a green screen being like, I'm going to save the Doctor. And the Brigadier's like, no, you're not. You're a woman.
Basically, yeah.
Legit.
I do like the one moment where the Doctor's like, my name is John Smith. And the ringleader's like, that's the most made up name ever. Like, what the fuck? Like, nobody has ever called out the Doctor on John Smith before.
Yeah, but John Smith is also a super common name,
Yeah, but it's also a really fake name. It's like calling your character Jane Doe. Yeah.
But we cut back to the old people every now and then as this is happening, and oh my god, yes, sorry, I paused it on the kitchen scene, which is just fantastic. The old people are like, oh, this doll's awful, whatever, I'm gonna go make myself a cup of coffee, and she goes into the quote unquote kitchen. The house, the main room is like an actual set, but everything else is green screen, and then the doll comes to life in some spectacular green screen. It all looks really well. Everything is aged perfectly in this episode, and it strangles the old man.
I'm sorry, I just
hilariously.
I just paused at a moment where if you look outside the window, it's just green. They forgot to chroma key it.
Amazing.
So, yeah, but that one shot of the woman in the kitchen wasn't needed, and it's so distracting.
No, not at all.
Like, she could have just been across the room or something. I don't know. It's so strange.
Oh my god, I see the green outside the window. Yeah. That's amazing. But yeah, the doll comes to life, strangles the man. It looks really bad. The costume when it's moving looks straight up like the dude from In the Night Garden.
Yeah, I think his name is Igglety Pigglety.
Makka Pakka. That's who it reminds me of.
Who
like
is Iggle Piggles
the blue. Iggle Piggles the blue guy.
Okay.
Ego Pickles, the blue guy. Makka Pakka is the one that looks like this dude.
Yeah.
God, in the Night Garden is such a fever of a kid show. Like, it's such a fever dream of a kid show.
But yeah, this scene means nothing to us, but apparently kids were fucking terrified. Like, Barry Lett's got so many letters just saying my kids were scared to take for teddy bears to bed at night in case we strangled them. Like, what the fuck?
Brilliant. Yeah. Kids like our generation, we didn't grow up with the horror story of toys coming alive. We grew up with Toy Story.
No, I mean, we grew up, I was about to mention
with
Small
Chucky
Soldiers.
as well.
Small Soldiers.
Small Soldiers, yeah, Small Soldiers.
Small
terrifying.
Soldiers is a blast. I love that movie so much.
It is a great time. Yeah, it's a good time. But yeah, it's a tale of old time, toys coming alive. But we cut back to the interrogation, and it continues to be about nothing until the guy leaves, and the doctor's like, "Oh, Tony, you don't say any words, do you?" And then Joe knocks him out, as of course Joe could take this dude on.
Yeah,
and she smashes something over his head, but
a 5'1" woman can totally take out like a 6'9" bodybuilder. Just a smack on the back of the neck.
Easy peasy. But we find out that the master's like spying on them with like a camera or whatever. Don't worry too much about it. Then there's an explosion, and who dies? Who's the guy that explodes?
I've lost the plot of who the characters are because they're so interesting.
There's so many and they're so bland. But somebody dies, and he's got like a key to. Is it a key? It's a key to the just any horse. Is that the master's one? What the fuck is happening? Like,
no, I'm sorry.
I've lost the plot completely.
I think it's the scientist guy who was an enemy of the world.
Yes, it's the scientist. The scientist explodes. Yes.
Yeah.
And they go into the caravan thinking it's the master's caravan, but it's not the master's caravan. It's just a regular caravan, which upsets all of the circus people who try to beat up the doctor and actually hit him, knocking him to the ground, making Joe scream. And I was like, oh my God, the episode's going to end. No, it's not. It's going to keep going. Don't worry about it. And there's like this really weird kerfuffle, and it gets really weird to know where everybody is at this point. Like, you kind of lose sense of what's going on, but apparently the doctor and Joe managed to get put into a car, and like the car drives off, and if you watch, one of the clowns like waves goodbye as they're driving away.
What the fuck? I haven't noticed this.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the clown. It's the guy in like the blue suit next to the clown. He's like, hang on.
Oh no, I see it. He just kind of waves up his arm.
He's like, bye. Yeah.
I guess that's just a bored extra.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't know the cameras were on.
Maybe, but like, I don't know. Maybe he just thought it'd be funny, But it was funny. But then the doctor and Joe wake up, and they're definitely in the back of this car that's definitely driving. And they're like, wait, where's this car taking us? Hey, driver, can you show us your badge? Do you really work with? Are you like a police officer? You work with the unit or whatever? And the guy turns around, and the doctor's like, hang on, I'm going to rip off your face now. Rips off his face to reveal Auton, and this is where the episode ends with a really lackluster scream from Joe. Like, Joe goes like, ah. She's like, oh no, God, that's scary. And then the credits roll. This is a garbage episode. This episode sucks so hard. Like...
Yeah, out of the three stories we've covered, this is the most generic Doctor Who episode so far this year.
Yeah, this episode, I am not into this story at all yet. Maybe parts 3 and 4 will change my mind. I've not seen them yet, but somehow I doubt that.
Yeah. For our first introduction to the Master, it's a bit lackluster, because I remember being a kid finding this video in like a charity shop. I got it for like £2, and I was so excited. It was the first episode with the Master in it, and I put it on in my video player, and I'm just like, I guess this is it.
Yeah, it's not good at all. It was slow in all the wrong places, funny for all the wrong reasons. Like,
it's weirdly clunky as well. It's just you can't make heads or tails what's going on. It's a bit of a weird edit. I'm not sure it's very strange.
I'm not a fan of this story. I'm not a fan of this story so far, which, to be fair, the Autons themselves are kind of a boring villain.
Yeah.
I think you can do something cool with them, but there's a reason they've only been in one episode of New Who.
Yeah.
And,
the Master isn't really doing much here, apart from killing people who just keep on entering the room. It's basically all he's doing.
Oh god, this episode was so bad. I'm so glad that it's over. I'm so glad. I'm so glad I don't have to talk about these 2 episodes anymore.
The cliffhanger is decent. Apparently, Scotland Yard complained because the show was undoing all their efforts to persuade children to trust them. The idea of just getting into a police car and then suddenly the policeman
and he's
is
a
evil.
robot. Yeah, he's an evil plastic robot. That's brilliant.
I'm sure that must have scared. I understand that scaring kids. The idea of that
This cliffhanger.
Bad.
This cliffhanger is much better than episode 1's cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But, the rest of this episode is not good. And all of episode 1 was not good. And it's painful to sit through at times.
Speaking of painful sitting, remember the couch?
Yeah. Oh, God, I wish I was in that couch right now. Just murder me.
What's your favorite part of the 2 episodes?
The effects. The special effects are my favorite part of the 2 episodes. That's the standout for me. That's the thing I want to talk about, is how great the special effects are. That's the best bit of it. They are so much... They're just funny. They allow you to have some fun in the episode that otherwise... if those bad blue screen wasn't here, this episode would be 10 times worse.
My favorite part is obviously gotta be the Master. I am entranced every time he is on screen because he just oozes charisma. He is so perfect in this role, and I just love him. He is still the best Master to me, hands down.
He's good Master. He's not my favorite, but he is definitely very, very good. Okay. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank fucking God. Next week we will be back as we look at parts 3 and 4 of The Terror of the Autons. Hopefully they're much better than parts 1 and 2. In the meantime, you can find this podcast in video form on youtube.com/whowatcheswhopod. I'm waving at the camera right now. It's also available in audio form wherever you listen to podcasts. There's a lot of links in the description so that you can find everything you need. You can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who, on Twitter at WatchesDoctor, and you can send us an email at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com. Send us an email telling us about your thoughts on this episode, on your thoughts on Doctor Who in general, or leave a comment down below on either our Facebook pages or on our YouTube, and we will be sure to read them out at the end of the month in our News Roundup podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Cloth223, and until next week, bye-bye.